The knock came just as Emily was finishing the last sip of her cold coffee, the soft sound echoing in the quiet house, making her pause mid-breath as if the sound itself carried a weight she couldn't name. She had been used to silence ever since the divorce, to the way her house felt emptier than the streets outside, and yet this knock carried something different, something hesitant, careful, almost nervous. Emily set down her mug and walked to the door, her heart picking up pace for no clear reason, her mind racing through possibilities, a neighbor, a delivery, a mistake. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. Standing there was Daniel, her ex-husband's son, taller now than the last time she had seen him, shoulders squared but eyes shadowed with something heavier than mere awkwardness. Time seemed to pause as she took in the young man who had once been a boy she barely knew, a child caught in a storm of adult mistakes and misunderstandings. "Hi, Emily," he said softly, his voice careful and steady, like he was afraid that even a sudden loud word might shatter the fragile bridge between them. She blinked, unsure if her surprise was curiosity, fear, or some stubborn echo of old feelings she thought she had buried. "I didn't know you were in town," she replied, keeping her voice calm, though a flicker of old memories passed through her mind, the dinners she had cooked, the evenings she had spent trying to soothe a house filled with tension, and the quiet moments she had stolen with a boy who had grown up faster than anyone should have to. Daniel shifted slightly, hands clasped in front of him, as if bracing against some invisible wind. "I wasn't sure I should come," he said, pausing as if weighing the risk of each word. "But there's something I need to tell you." Emily hesitated, her mind spinning with curiosity and unease, yet she stepped aside, silently inviting him in, and in that moment, the air between them felt charged, like a storm ready to break, full of questions neither of them knew how to answer yet. As Daniel crossed the threshold, the house seemed to hold its breath, the familiar walls echoing memories of a life that had once been shared and then abandoned, leaving only fragments behind. She watched him sit on the edge of the couch, noticing the small changes, the way he carried himself now, the way his eyes held stories she hadn't been there to witness, the way his hands trembled ever so slightly as if he feared making a wrong move. "Emily," he began again, voice steady but quiet, "I came because I needed to speak to you, not about my dad, not about the past, but about something that's been on my mind for years." She felt a strange tension in her chest, a mix of apprehension and unexpected warmth, remembering all the times she had wondered what he thought of her after she left, whether he blamed her, or missed her, or even noticed she was gone at all. The room felt smaller now, the light from the porch lamp spilling in and touching both of them, creating shadows that seemed to whisper the weight of unspoken words. Emily tried to stay composed, telling herself this was just a visit, that she didn't need to let her heart or mind wander into dangerous territory, yet the very presence of Daniel, the way he looked at her with such honesty, made her question how much of the past she had truly understood. He took a slow breath, and for a moment, the world outside the window disappeared, the noise of cars, the distant barking of dogs, even the gentle hum of the refrigerator, everything faded except the quiet electricity between them. "I know things weren't perfect," he said carefully, "and I know I may have judged you when I shouldn't have. I want you to hear me out, Emily, because I need to say this, and I can't hold it in any longer." Emily's throat tightened, a lump forming as she realized that this visit wasn't casual or fleeting, it was something heavier, something that demanded her full attention and her full heart, whether she wanted it or not. Memories she had long buried rose slowly, like a tide coming back, gentle but unstoppable, the way she had tried to keep peace, the arguments she had witnessed, the moments she had chosen silence over confrontation, and the quiet care she had offered to a boy who had been growing up in a storm of confusion and hurt. She felt a pull she hadn't expected, a reminder that human connections could linger long after they were thought lost, that people could carry unspoken emotions for years, waiting for the right moment to release them. Daniel's gaze never wavered, steady and sincere, full of a vulnerability that made her heart ache with empathy and a strange, bittersweet longing. She stepped aside fully, letting him in, her hands brushing briefly against the door frame, feeling a warmth she hadn't known she needed. The house, once quiet and still, now felt alive with anticipation, every corner holding the memory of past conversations, laughter, and quiet tears, but also a possibility of understanding and reconciliation. As he settled on the couch, she realized that the evening ahead would not be ordinary, that what he was about to share could change everything she thought she knew about him, about her own choices, and about the way the past could reshape the present. The air felt electric, charged with emotion and expectation, as Emily poured a fresh cup of coffee and handed it to him, the simple gesture breaking the initial tension but also signaling a fragile connection being rebuilt. Daniel accepted it with a faint, grateful smile, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt her pulse quicken, not from fear or regret, but from the recognition that life sometimes brings people back in ways that matter, ways that demand honesty and courage, and ways that can quietly, powerfully, change a heart. The knock that had seemed so ordinary an hour ago had opened a door, not just to her home, but to emotions she hadn't touched in years, memories she had feared were lost, and a conversation that promised to shift everything she thought she knew about love, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways the heart can heal. As Daniel finally spoke the first words of what she sensed would be a long, heartfelt confession, Emily listened, knowing that tonight, her quiet house was no longer just a space to live, it was a place where the past and the present were about to meet, and perhaps, where a new understanding could begin. The living room felt smaller than she remembered, yet strangely alive, filled with a tension that buzzed quietly in the air as Daniel leaned forward slightly on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together like he was holding back words that had been trapped for years, and Emily watched him carefully, her mind racing to match his calm expression with the storm of questions and memories that suddenly crowded her thoughts. She remembered the nights she had stayed up listening to the faint sounds of the house, the way she had tried to patch the cracks in a family that seemed to split apart at every corner, the meals she had prepared quietly while tension hummed in the background, and the quiet ways she had tried to be a bridge between a father and a son who barely spoke, and yet now, seeing him here, grown and serious, she realized that the past had shaped him in ways she could only guess at, and the realization made her chest tighten with something she couldn't name. "Emily," he began, voice low but steady, "I didn't come here because I wanted to blame anyone, not my dad, not you, not even myself, but because I need to say this and finally be honest, and I couldn't leave without it." She nodded slightly, urging him to continue without words, feeling the weight of anticipation press against her ribs, a mixture of curiosity, nervousness, and a strange, growing warmth. He took a deep breath, eyes flicking to the window for a moment before returning to hers, and in that look was a mixture of hesitation, sincerity, and a vulnerability that struck her more than she expected, reminding her that beneath the years and the misunderstandings, he was still that boy who had once looked to her for guidance, for care, for reassurance, and she realized she had never really understood how much he had needed her presence all those years ago. "When you left," he said slowly, choosing each word, "I thought you were just giving up on everything, on him, on me, on what we could have been. And for years, I carried that in silence, letting it shape how I saw everything and everyone around me. I blamed you, even when I knew it wasn't fair, even when part of me wanted to reach out, but fear and pride held me back." Emily felt a pang of guilt mixed with sympathy, remembering how she had thought leaving was the only way to survive, believing she was doing the right thing for herself and hoping, in some quiet corner, that it might somehow be better for him too. She opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand, as if asking her to listen first, and she did, leaning back slightly and feeling the pull of emotions she hadn't touched in years. "I didn't understand back then what it meant to care, to be patient, or to see someone's choices as a reflection of their courage and not their failure," Daniel continued, voice softening, "but growing up, watching myself stumble in ways I didn't expect, and seeing the mistakes I made with people I loved, I finally understood. You weren't running away because you didn't care. You were brave enough to walk away from what wasn't healthy, from what wasn't working, from a life that could have trapped you in bitterness." Emily's throat tightened, her hands clutching the edge of her chair as if steadying herself, because in those words was a truth she had hoped he might see one day, and yet hearing it now, from him, was heavier than anything she could have imagined. It was not just acknowledgement, it was admiration, understanding, and a quiet, poignant gratitude that made the air feel warm, as if the years of distance and misunderstanding were shrinking in that very moment. "I needed to tell you this," Daniel said, leaning back slightly, eyes soft but unwavering, "because holding on to anger or resentment didn't make me stronger, it only made me smaller, and now, finally, I can see things clearly. You were never the problem, Emily. You were the calm, the voice of reason, the piece of light in a house that sometimes felt like it was falling apart. And I never appreciated it enough until now. Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a mixture of relief, sadness, and a tender recognition that the bond they shared, though complicated, had never fully vanished. She realized she had spent years replaying her choices in her mind, questioning whether leaving had been right, and now she could see that even in leaving, she had left behind something valuable, something that had quietly shaped the man before her. She swallowed hard, unsure if her voice could carry all the things she wanted to say, and yet she tried, whispering, "Daniel, I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to survive, and I hoped, somehow, that you would understand one day." He nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile forming as if the words themselves were a balm, not just for him, but for both of them, and Emily felt a warmth that surprised her, a gentle recognition that hearts could mend in ways that didn't erase the past but made it meaningful instead. Outside, the light was fading, casting long shadows across the room, and yet inside, the quiet exchange seemed to illuminate the space, filling it with a soft glow of understanding, as if every corner remembered their shared history and now approved of this moment of honesty. "I know it's late," Daniel said, standing slowly, "but I had to come. I couldn't leave without saying this, without letting you know that you mattered, that you still matter, and that the way I felt was shaped by you more than you know." Emily watched him, a mix of pride, relief, and a strange longing washing over her, recognizing that the boy who had once been caught in a storm of grown-up troubles had grown into someone capable of seeing truth without anger, capable of honoring the past without bitterness. She realized that this conversation, this confession, had shifted something in her too, had made her see that time did not always dull emotion, that love and care could linger quietly, and that sometimes the hardest truths, when spoken, could heal wounds she hadn't known were still open. They stood together in the quiet room, hearts beating in parallel, and Emily understood that life had a way of circling back, of giving second chances not necessarily in romance, but in understanding, empathy, and connection, and that this moment, simple as it seemed, carried the weight of years of missed words, unspoken apologies, and quiet admiration that had finally found its voice. As Daniel walked to the door, ready to leave but pausing to glance back, Emily felt a subtle shift within herself, a softening of the past's grip and an opening of space for hope, for peace, and maybe even for a new way to see the man he had become, shaped not only by the challenges of his childhood but by the kindness she had shown when it was needed most. She realized that the night was no longer just an ordinary evening, it was a turning point, a bridge between past misunderstandings and present clarity, and as she watched him step out into the fading light, she knew that something quiet but profound had begun between them, something that had the power to change the way she understood her past, herself, and the fragile, beautiful ways that human hearts could finally connect when honesty and courage came together in the same room. Daniel's eyes lingered on Emily as he sat back down, the soft glow of the lamp catching the lines of his face that had formed over years of growing up too fast, and for a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence heavy but charged, carrying the weight of things left unsaid for far too long, and Emily felt her chest tighten with a strange mix of anticipation and fear, wondering what he would say, how it might change everything she thought she understood about him, about herself, and about the past they had shared indirectly through absence and memory. Finally, he spoke, voice quiet but steady, "Emily, I need to tell you something I've never said to anyone," and she leaned forward slightly, gripping her mug as if holding onto it could anchor her through the storm of emotions she felt rising, because she sensed that this confession would not just explain his past, but reshape how she viewed everything that had happened between them, including her own choices and the long nights of guilt and regret she had carried. "I blamed you for a long time," Daniel began, his gaze dropping for a second before meeting hers again with a raw honesty that made her heart ache. "I thought you walked away from my dad, from me, because you didn't care, because you thought it was easy to leave, and for years, I held that against you in silence, in anger, and in ways I didn't even fully understand until recently," and Emily felt her throat tighten, memories flooding her mind, the tension-filled dinners, the nights she had watched him sleep, trying to make sure he felt safe in a home that wasn't always kind, the small moments of connection she had taken for granted, never realizing how much they might mean to him, and now hearing his words, she realized how much of the story had been hidden behind silence and assumptions, how much pain and misunderstanding had built up simply because they hadn't spoken honestly. Daniel took a deep breath, hands clasped tightly in front of him as if bracing against the flood of emotion he was finally letting out, and continued, I see now that it wasn't your fault, that leaving was brave, not cruel, and that you tried to be a light in a house that sometimes felt dark, that you were patient when I was ungrateful, kind when I was bitter, and caring when I didn't know how to accept it, and I never told you that I noticed that I needed it, and that I'm grateful for it even now. And Emily's eyes filled, a mixture of tears she wouldn't let fall yet and a warm ache in her chest that made her realize how much this moment meant to both of them, a long overdue reconciliation of truth that had been waiting years to surface. She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but he held up a hand, shaking his head gently. Let me finish, he said, and she nodded, listening intently as he poured out the feelings he had carried in silence, words spilling like water that had been trapped behind a dam. I didn't understand love when I was younger, or care, or patience, or the strength it takes to do what's right instead of what's easy, but growing up made me see, made me realize that the person I blamed, the person I misunderstood, was actually one of the most important influences in my life, and that's you, Emily. And she felt a shiver run through her, not from romance exactly, but from the depth of connection. The recognition that someone truly understood her choices, her intentions, and the quiet ways she had tried to make life better for a boy who had grown into a man before her eyes. Daniel leaned back slightly, voice softer now, almost vulnerable. I needed you to know this because keeping it inside made me resentful, made me bitter, and even though it's late, and even though it's complicated, I couldn't leave without telling you that I understand now, that I see the truth, and that I'm not angry anymore, not at you, not at anyone, because I finally understand the courage it took for you to make the choices you made. And Emily felt the lump in her throat grow heavier, a mixture of relief, sadness, and a quiet pride, realizing that years of regret, guilt, and distance were finally met with recognition and empathy, and that the bridge between them, though formed slowly and with difficulty, was strong enough to support honesty and perhaps even a new kind of closeness. She whispered, finally, her voice trembling, Daniel, I never wanted to hurt you. I thought leaving was the only way to survive, to protect myself, but I always hoped you would understand one day. And he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile appearing, as if her words were a balm to his own wounds, confirming that the emotional weight he carried for so long could now start to lighten. And Emily realized that their shared history, complicated and imperfect as it was, had not left them empty-handed, but instead gave them a chance to heal, to acknowledge the pain and the care, and to finally see each other clearly without blame or misunderstanding. Daniel reached out slightly, hesitated, and then spoke again. I wish I could have said this years ago, but I'm glad I can say it now, that I can be honest, that I can tell you that your presence mattered, that it shaped me in ways I'm only beginning to understand, and that even if our past was messy, it wasn't wasted. And Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a gentle, comforting feeling that told her all. The sleepless nights, all the quiet struggles, all the silent prayers and fears, had mattered in ways she hadn't realized, and that perhaps this moment was more powerful than any apology or explanation could have been, because it carried the weight of truth, of acknowledgement, and of emotional connection. Outside, the night seemed deeper, quieter, but inside, the room felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had sighed with relief at finally hearing the truth. And Emily felt her shoulders loosen, a soft smile forming, not because the past was erased, but because it was understood, recognized, and respected in a way that made room for something new, something gentle, something promising. Daniel stood at last, taking a slow breath, his eyes meeting hers with a clarity that was almost disarming. I hope someday, he said softly, you let yourself be loved again, and I hope you know that you're seen, truly seen, for everything you did and everything you are. And Emily felt a quiet ache, a tender, soft longing for a future unburdened by regrets, for a heart finally allowed to breathe freely after years of carrying unspoken burdens. And as he walked to the door, pausing to glance back one last time, she realized that this confession, simple as it was, had shifted something profound inside her, that understanding could be a kind of love, that acknowledgement could be healing, and that sometimes, the gentlest words could carry more power than years of distance, silence, or misunderstanding, leaving her alone with a heart that felt lighter, a mind that felt clearer, and a quiet, glowing sense that life had given her an unexpected gift, a chance to see herself and the people she once loved in a new, forgiving, and deeply human light. Emily stood by the window long after Daniel had left, the quiet click of the door still echoing in her mind as the night wrapped around the house, and she realized that the evening had changed something inside her. Something subtle yet profound, a soft loosening of the weight she had carried for years, because hearing his confession, seeing his honesty, and feeling the depth of understanding he had offered made her heart feel lighter, not empty, but open in a way it hadn't been since the divorce, since she had walked away from a life that had grown too heavy to hold, and now, in the stillness of her living room, she could finally see the past clearly, not as a chain of mistakes or regrets, but as a series of moments that had shaped her, that had given her strength, patience, and the ability to love in ways she had never fully appreciated, and she realized that sometimes love wasn't about staying, wasn't about fixing everything or holding on at all costs, but about understanding, letting go, and honoring what had been, no matter how painful or messy it might have seemed at the time. She sank onto the couch, wrapping her arms around herself, and let her mind wander over the events of the night, remembering Daniel's words, the way he had spoken with such honesty and care, how he had looked at her not with blame or anger, but with recognition of the courage it had taken to leave a broken situation, and Emily felt a quiet warmth spreading through her chest, a gentle affirmation that she had done what she needed to do, that her choices, though difficult, had not been in vain. And that in some strange, unexpected way, they had left a mark that mattered, that had shaped someone she cared about deeply even if they were not bound by love in the traditional sense. She thought about the way he had admitted his misunderstandings, the way he had acknowledged the impact she had had on him, the way he had spoken about forgiveness, growth, and the clarity that comes with time, and Emily realized that this moment, this conversation, was not just about him, it was about her too, about reclaiming her own narrative, understanding that walking away from what was broken had not made her selfish, had not made her unworthy, but had made her strong, capable of seeing truth clearly, and ready to embrace life again with open eyes and a more peaceful heart. Outside, the street was quiet, a few distant headlights painting streaks of gold across the pavement, and she felt as though the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to let go fully, to let herself breathe without guilt or fear, because the conversation she had shared with Daniel had been more than words, it had been a release, a gentle lifting of a burden she hadn't realized she had carried so long. And Emily felt tears threaten to fall, not from sadness, but from relief, from the quiet joy of understanding, from the soft power of human connection finally expressed honestly after years of waiting in silence. She thought about the years of distance, the misunderstandings, the bitterness that had lingered unspoken, and she realized that while the past could not be changed, it could be honored, acknowledged, and accepted, and that in doing so, she could step forward without carrying unnecessary weight. With the knowledge that relationships, even complicated ones, could leave a lasting positive impact when approached with care, sincerity, and courage, and that her presence in Daniel's life, though it had ended in separation, had mattered more than she had allowed herself to believe. Emily leaned back, letting herself feel the quiet power of forgiveness, for him, for herself, for all the moments that had been painful but had also taught her resilience, patience, and the strength to move forward, and she realized that healing was not sudden or dramatic, it was gentle, quiet, and often arrived in ways that seemed small but carried immense weight, like the knock on her door that had set everything in motion tonight, like the words spoken with care, like the acknowledgement of courage and love in forms that didn't require romantic closeness but carried emotional depth that resonated far beyond a single conversation. She thought about the future, and for the first time in a long while it felt open, not frightening, not heavy, but full of possibility, because she had faced the past, she had been seen, she had listened, and she had been heard, and that kind of clarity, rare as it was, allowed space for hope, for joy, and even for love of a different kind, gentle, patient, and real. Emily walked slowly to the kitchen, pouring herself a fresh cup of tea, feeling the warmth in her hands, the steam rising softly like a reminder that life continued, that mornings would come, and that she was ready to meet them with a heart no longer shackled by guilt or regret. She thought about Daniel again, the way he had looked at her with honesty and gratitude, the way he had admitted his own misunderstandings, and she felt a tender affection, not romantic in the conventional sense, but something deeper, a recognition of shared history, mutual respect, and the bond that comes from understanding and reconciliation, and she knew that this connection, now clarified and unburdened by blame, would remain a quiet light in her heart, a reminder that people could matter in ways beyond immediate presence or conventional relationships, and that love, care, and acknowledgement could survive even the distance of years. Night deepened, shadows stretching across the floor, and Emily sat by the window again, watching the soft glow of streetlights flicker, imagining a life where past mistakes were not chains but lessons, where hearts could heal quietly, and where courage, honesty, and understanding could create beauty even from what once felt broken. She smiled softly, feeling a peace she hadn't known she needed, a gentle confidence that life could surprise her, that people could grow, that hearts could open again, and that even endings, when seen clearly and compassionately, could be beginnings in disguise, giving space for new possibilities, new joys, and a renewed sense of self. In that quiet room, filled with